Good afternoon. My name is Kristopher Burrell. I am an associate professor of history here at Hostos Community College and one of the members of the Black at Hostos Town Hall Series Committee. And we are very happy to welcome you all to our third and final event of the Spring 2025 Town Hall Series about the state of immigration in the U.S. today. It's important to note that this series began in the fall of 2020 as a result of student demand in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the racial reckoning that occurred throughout the country and around the world. Students wanted to know how our college would respond to the events of the time. And as a result of the president's initiative, the Black at Hostos Town Hall Series was established. And each spring, we've been able to coordinate a series of events around a theme to talk about how Black students at Hostos and Black people throughout the country and the diaspora exist in our society. Just a brief word about the format. We have two wonderful guest speakers here who I'll introduce in a little bit. But we intend for this event to be a conversation about immigration policy, as well as how what is happening are affecting real individuals here, both locally and nationally. And then also have the opportunity for our audience members to participate with their questions as well. So without further ado, I'd like to bring our president, President Coco de Filippis, to the stage to give some words of welcome.
The last few days at Hostos have been incredible. Have kept me humming, but I wouldn't miss this, especially because it is a topic about immigration. I am an immigrant. I have a family, and I married an immigrant. And I have a family of loved ones who are immigrants, including my students and my faculty who were not born, and staff who were not born in this country. We did a little survey of the President's Executive Cabinet, and it turns out that 5 out of 8 were born, including the President, outside of the United States. So that just tells you what having gone through, in my case, being an immigrant, just getting to 9th grade, in junior high, in a school where there were very few Hispanics, what that was like. But what makes you strong, in my case, was my loving family and also the faculty that actually saw this kid who loved school and loved books, and they actually encouraged and pushed me. So I have tremendous understanding that kindred spirits means anybody, however diverse they may be, as long as they share your values and your hope and your care. So we have, as I understand it, we have our wonderful Dr. Burrell, who has been from day one the heart and the drive, working with my office and working with colleagues and the committee to keep this moving. And we have from Hostos, Denise Herrera. You graduated after I left. I left in 2008 to become the president in Connecticut, and then came back now in 2020. You know, so Denise, I didn't get to have you while I was here, but I'm sure you're doing really great. You're an immigration social worker, which is wonderful. And the Bronx Defenders, Cynthia Katz, managing attorney, legal and asylum, HIAS. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're so very kind to do this. Thinking about one of the developments this week, and I'm not speaking as a Catholic. I don't have the moral standing to speak as a Catholic since I haven't been in church for many years. But, so I'm speaking now as a human being. And thinking of this morning where I was at the Hostos Earth Day celebration, and consider the concerns for climate change and the environment, and considering his position also as a son of immigrants to Argentina, of Pope Francis, who, if anything, if you remember him, it's because he opened the church to the LGBTQ community, because he defended immigrants. And in fact, when there was this group of refugees that Italy was debating what they were going to do, they were Palestinians, they were in the island of Lampedusa. He got on a plane, went to Lampedusa, and loaded his plane with Palestinians that he brought to Rome, and they had to deal with it. Okay? So this is the man. So I found out from the chief. So you see, everybody's a source of information. I found out from the chief who so some kind of a program about the Pope, about his life. And his favorite poem. Now, the chief said to me, it's in Italian. Well, it's not in Italian. It's in Piemontese, which is mixed, because it's towards the north, it's mixed with German and what have you. But I could figure out that I could translate to English one stanza for you to understand. It's called Our Race. And the race that he means is the human race, because it's immigrants that are going everywhere. And he talks about immigrants as people who bring time and labor. Our soul, free and stubborn. It takes tremendous deliberation to immigrate. The world knows who we are, and when we pass by, the world observes. I don't know what will happen. Just this morning in the news, there was a senator from Vermont who talked about how they didn't know they had taken from one of the dairy farms 7 immigrants. ICE has stopped by and taken them. And she didn't know, they didn't know in Vermont if they would lose this product. It was so important because the people who actually milked the cows were the immigrants. There's a lot of silent labor that goes to accumulate the comforts. In my own Dominican Republic, also really mistreated there by the Dominican government. The Haitians, immigrants, are the ones who cut the sugar cane and do a lot of the work in the fields. That because it's so hot and dry and awful, the climate to do that, Dominicans don't want to do. So this is all happening, and it's almost, in fact, the person that I was having lunch, I was a little late, was Matthias Bosch. His grandfather was Juan Bosch, who had been one of the most distinguished writers in the Dominican Republic, also a president of the Dominican Republic, and who I met. He showed up to actually give an introduction to one of my books of short stories, but his son was here when we had the Hostos Martí conference. And then again, I was in Santo Domingo, and I was reading, I was supposed to talk about Julia de Burgos, which I did, but I also read a letter dissenting with the government about their treatments of the Haitians, right in the Biblioteca Nacional, with a room full of them all. And about how, and I said, in the United States, we Dominicans are the Haitians. We are the outsiders. Haitians and we our brothers and sisters. So why do I say this? Remember that there are immigrants running the school. And the students, many are immigrants, and many other faculty and staff are immigrants. And we are doing quite well considering the challenges that we face and the way we help. This is why the college was recognized in January, when there was still the Department of Education, by the Department of Education as one of the top 6 schools that was elevating students who were poor. Hostos was one of the 6 nationwide, the only college in all of the state of New York, not just CUNY, SUNY, because they looked at the number of students who received Pell Grants, and then they looked at the graduation outcomes and also the job placements and a lot of other markers. And so it was a recognition of taking someone who had the poorest and the least prepared in CUNY and giving them a chance to succeed in a successful, and that's thanks to all of you who are here, who are either faculty, staff, or the students who are here who will go out to do the next thing. So I think I came late and I took too long. Chris, thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you so much.
To my immediate right is Denise Herrera, a wonderful alum and honors program student from when she was here, who since graduation has gone on to earn a master's degree in social work at the Silberman School of Social Work at Hunter College. Denise is a Bronx native and a proud Mexican American born to immigrant parents. Growing up in a diverse immigrant community, she has experienced firsthand the struggles of immigrants like her parents to build better lives for their families and children. In 2016, her father was detained by ICE, which ultimately led to his deportation back to his native country, Mexico. Since then, this traumatic experience motivated her to pursue a career in defense social work and provide assistance to individuals who are going through criminal and immigration proceedings. Denise is now an immigration social worker at the Bronx Defenders. In her role as a social worker, she is responsible for supporting clients while they navigate their legal cases. Some examples include preparing written advocacy, coordinating with treatment programs and social service providers, and providing re-entry services to clients upon release from detention. Before joining the Bronx Defenders, Denise was a legal assistant at the Immigration Law Office of Christian Y. Alvarez, working on a vast range of immigration matters, including U visa, VAWA, adjustment of status, asylum cases, and other legal matters. Denise applies her personal experience and her social work skills to advocate for clients who have experienced significant trauma while also being impacted by carceral systems. So obviously very important work.
Absolutely.
And to my far right, we have Cynthia G. Katz, who is managing attorney in the New York office at HIAS, where the legal team primarily represents asylum seekers fleeing persecution, survivors of violent crimes, and individuals seeking humanitarian protection and other forms of relief from removal or deportation from the United States. She previously served as an asylum officer at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, where she interviewed people seeking protection from persecution and adjudicated their asylum claims. Before entering government service, she created, built, and ran an immigration law firm for 19 years. A longtime member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, or AILA, she is a recipient of its Advocate of the Year Award. She is a former member of the board of directors of the Center for Multicultural Human Services, a Northern Virginia-based nonprofit organization that offered holistic mental health, legal, and social services to the greater Washington, D.C. immigrant community. She is a graduate of Duke University School of Law and Barnard College of Columbia University. She is also a member of the bars of Maryland and Washington, D.C. So please welcome our two panelists. So I'm supposed to give a kind of historical overview of immigration in the U.S., and I'm going to do that in about 3 or 4 sentences, hopefully. If we look at the 20th and 21st century of U.S. immigration policy, there has been a lot, and it has been unjust, largely. But we can go back to the 1920s and talk about the quota systems that were put into place to limit the number of people from Southern and Eastern Europe, for example, and as well as from East Asia being allowed into the United States. We can look to the post-World War II period and talk about the worker programs that were instituted in Mexico and other parts of Latin America. We can look to our 1965 immigration law, which began to open up some of those, eliminate some of those quota systems, but brought in other problems as well with them. And then we have, the last time we've had amnesty for immigrants in the U.S. was in the 1980s under President Ronald Reagan. And so there's been decades in which we have had a huge, sort of gap and glut in immigration policy that has, led us to the point that we're at today. And so I want to throw it open to our panelists to be able to talk a little bit about how historical immigration policies have shaped the current state of immigration in America, as well as to be able to talk a bit about the significant impact that immigration has had on our society. Cynthia, could we start with you?
Certainly.
Okay.
Well, I think one example, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I'll get started. So, the historical implications are, for example, the organization where I work, excuse me, HIAS stands for the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, and it's over 100 years old. It's one of the oldest resettlement agencies in the world, and particularly in the United States. And it was born out of anti-Semitism, people fleeing pogroms, as the professor mentioned, in Southern Europe, and the more restrictionist, if you will, immigration laws that were put into place. In the 1920s, the immigration system became criminalized for the first time in the United States. So we come here with over 100 years of fight, if you will. So to jump to the 21st century, we look at what's going on right now. A lot of it seems very new, and it's certainly very ugly. As we look back in that historical context, however, we do see that unfortunately it's sort of like hit play or hit restart. So there's a lot of things that we are seeing now that did occur during the previous presidential administrations. However, they weren't often talked about or certainly used to weaponize, divide people, terrorize people. So I say it's not to say that removals did not happen in the past. They certainly did, but they weren't so publicized. And unfortunately, what we have seen in our office, where we represent people from all over the world, we have seen already the objectives of, and I always try to sound as neutral as I can, but what has happened in 2025 has resulted in further terrorizing our clients and sleepless nights for, and I'm sure, as Denise will say, the people that we all represent and serve. So the damage, unfortunately, even though there hasn't been any change in the law since 1995, I think, the damage in how the law has been enforced and weaponized has already been done by making people afraid of seeking services to which they are entitled. So, for example, clients who are afraid to attend houses of worship, clients who are afraid to attend doctor appointments, clients, whether they've been here number of years or number of months, afraid to go send their kids to school. So the fear has already, that first, I don't know if you'll recall, but that first blast in January 2025 with people giving us phone calls and text messages saying, I'm afraid, ICE is in the subway station. ICE is at my child's school. Whether it was true or not, they saw someone that they thought was law enforcement, and they heard on the news this is what was going to happen. So we did have cases in my office where a gentleman told me my coworker was stopped in the subway on the way to work, and he's a U.S. citizen. What do? I'm an asylum seeker. So we spent a lot of time just doing damage control. So it's almost like, where do we see this phase of history? And it is history, unfortunately, repeating itself, but it's repeating itself on steroids because now everybody is at risk of apprehension and detention and potentially removal. So even if someone is not, quote unquote, removed or deported from the United States, if that person is detained or that person undergoes that threat of detention, there's already a lot of trauma that's taken place, not just for the individual, but every life that that individual touches.
Yeah, I think it's really important the way that you are helping us frame this as not entirely new, right? But also not totally unique. Is really important for us to understand that we have been dealing with the legacies of immigration policy and, in fact, the legacies of the lack of immigration policy for these last 30 to 40 years. Denise, tell us about your experience working with the clients that you see.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. First, I just want to say that my opinions are mine. I'm not here on behalf of BXD, but the work that I do is so unique because, for example, like I'm just going to put my experience into for context. Like when my dad, the reason why my father got deported, it was under Obama's administration, but it was because he had a warrant from California for stealing some shoes for me from Marshall's. And so he didn't know he had to go to court. And so by then he was like, we moved to New York and nobody advised him, right, what would happen if he missed his court date. So years later, like more than 20 years later, there was an audit at his job, and so they were checking like who was using like certain false documents, right, to work because he was undocumented. And so that eventually led to his arrest and then detention and then deportation. And so the type of work that we do in our office is when a client gets referred to our immigration practice, they're referred usually because of criminal offenses, right? Alleged criminal offenses. So what would happen is, wait, before you plead guilty to a certain crime, let's think about the immigration consequences, right? Like, what would happen if you plead guilty to this? How is this going to affect your immigration case? And so I think that's why often when we think of immigrants, we don't also think about that they have other intersecting identities, how sometimes people do crimes of poverty, right? And so like that is also a thing that we're seeing now. They're criminalizing immigration even further right now. And I think that is something that is very close to my heart because regardless of the alleged harm that they have done, everybody deserves the right to due process, right? And they should all be protected regardless. So right now we see a really huge impact in the community. They're afraid to go to work. They're afraid to take their children to school, take their children to the hospital, right? And then we also think about like mothers, right, who like, what if they, like, it's either like take my children to school or not, right? And then like thinking about like, what if ACS gets involved? So it's like, there's just so many systems that have a say right now, and it's like putting a lot of people on edge.
No, I appreciate that. I think it is important that we think about the intersecting identities, as you say, of all of these people who are involved in, the immigration system in one way or another. But I also want to dig down with both of you a little bit on that idea of even further, right? So we know that, as you said, Cynthia, that beginning in the 1920s is when we begin to see the criminalization of immigration in the United States for different reasons, but that in this moment, we're seeing things happen even further. So I wanted to know if you two could address the ways in which this moment is different, the way that this moment is in which immigration is perhaps being weaponized even more than in previous presidential administration or in previous decades.
I guess I can talk about, we all know right now that the media is using the Tren de Aragua to further weaponize immigration, and for example, they're using tattoos as a signifying factor to be part of gangs, and I think that's also very harmful too, because tattoos can also be culture, and they don't understand that, right? That colonized thinking that tattoos are not part of culture, the way people dress, right, are coming from other countries. We're also seeing political reasons to also be a reason why they're weaponizing immigration. So for example, Mahmoud Khalil, right? He literally just got detained. He was just denied release as well. So it's not just people now who are non-citizens. It also could be people who are under certain categories, like immigration categories. So everybody is now at risk. It's no longer certain people. And so, the opening of Guantanamo, right, is also very scary that they're sending them now to El Salvador too. And that just makes you think, what if there's people here and they're sending them to El Salvador? How are they going to keep in contact? How are they, this is going to give a trickle-down effect of a lot of trauma, right? It's collective trauma now that we're going to be experiencing.
I think, well, there's a couple of things I want to address, and one of the things in keeping in mind about this series of Blacks at Hostos, I wanted to tell you or share with you a story of a situation I encountered years ago. So as we were talking, you were mentioning informing immigrants of the potential of taking a guilty plea. That's a case called Padilla versus Kentucky. And it was land-breaking when the case was decided by the US Supreme Court, because it sort of forces criminal defense attorneys to ask immigration status. So going back to about the time when this case was first announced, I served in capacity as a private practitioner in private practice, where I would do what's called crimmigration law. And in the practice of crimmigration, I would work with criminal defense attorneys and try to avoid the situation where, unfortunately, Denise's father found himself. And so people would come to me because they were not US citizens. So I remember once I asked this criminal defense attorney, he was representing a Black lady, and I forget where she was from, but maybe she was from an originally English-speaking country. And I said, did you ask her country of birth? Because it's a very simple, in terms of advising criminal defense attorneys, it's very simple to do. Because once you find out the country of birth, then you know, oh, I need to go down and ask what is the person's current immigration status, do you have status? So his response to me is, did you ask her country of birth? He said, no. And I said, is there any particular, and I'm not trying to find fault, but we're here at this workshop to try to learn how to serve our clients. And he said, well, why would I ask her that? She's Black. And I had to explain to him that because a person is Black, and again, this intersection of multiple identities doesn't mean that the person was born in the United States and is a US citizen and doesn't need to be brought up to date on the potential consequences of a guilty plea. So I just wanted to share that with you all. So again, as we talk about what is new with immigration and the impact, it's really difficult for me to think of something that is new. And I really think it boils down to how this administration is using it and sort of being, if you will, and these opinions are my own, based on what I've seen. There's a bullying that did not occur before. So, for example, President Obama, for a long time, held the record as the porter-in-chief. Everybody knew that. But things did not happen so quickly where a person did not even have due process and was basically not allowed to appear in front of the immigration judge. So there has been this sort of tattoos. I represented people with tattoos or didn't have tattoos and had to tell the person, expect when you go in for an ICE appointment to be asked to roll up your sleeves or roll up your pants legs because your body will be checked for tattoos. So please let me know if you have tattoos. So at least this way, I could say, all right, this is what we're gonna do. We are forearmed as we go and face this tribunal. When I was an asylum officer, I saw people with tattoos. But there's a matter of discretion. Is this cultural? What is this? And if you tell me you're a gang member, I can better give you advice, legal advice, so you may decide, no, it's not worth it for me. I'm not gonna fight this, or I'm going to, quote unquote, self-deport, or I'm going to explain why I have this. So that's another example. And then there is something that we now call, or we've called for a while, digital hygiene. Digital hygiene literally means what's on your phone, because a phone is subject to inspection at every port or point of entry into the United States. That's been the law. So attorneys know when I travel, I might be asked to unlock my phone, but at least I'm prepared with a response, or I decide maybe I'm not gonna bring my phone. And there's all these things, but I think the big difference, non-immigrant visas, people who entered without a visa, I always would advise people, and I still do, think of it as coming to somebody's house, no matter what it is. How do I behave when I am a guest in somebody's house? There are sometimes people, I went away for vacation, I came back, and there's somebody at my house. I did not ask that person to come. That person decided to come to my house. But I look outside, the building looks beautiful, there's, plants planted, the lawn is done, the trees have been trimmed. So maybe I'm not that upset because the person came here, well, I didn't ask you to come here, you came without an invitation, but you are improving my surroundings, so I'm happy. I go into my house and wow, you've done the dishes, you've mopped the floor, I'm happy. And then there might be some people that are either in my house because I've asked them to come to my house, or they took it upon them to come to my house, and they start fighting with me. So now I have to make a decision. Why are you fighting with me? Are you threatening me? Do I just not like what you said? Or has it bridged the point where it's not free speech anymore? Now it's you're making me feel uncomfortable and intimidating me, or you are using hateful words. I may not want you to stay here any longer. So that's always been on the books. But again, the weaponization, to not let that person, I'm gonna throw you out of my house. Am I just gonna toss you out? Or am I gonna say, I think you said this to me. What did you mean when you said that? So that's where there's the breakdown of the process and the lack of due process, because oftentimes, sometimes the person may not deserve to provide an explanation, but most of the times the person does deserve the chance to explain him or herself or be put on warning that you're in my house, I don't like what you said to me, you continue to say that, I'm gonna ask you to leave, or you assault me, I'm gonna get law enforcement in here, have you taken out. So I think for me, that's what I see as the big change, and then particularly in a system with such a backlog of cases. I have clients who've been waiting in excess of 10 years for a quote-unquote day in court. So I get upset when I hear someone is taken off the street and now this person is gonna have a hearing before my client has a hearing, and my clients are upset. So how do we balance that, and where do we see the nuances? I think that's the big dilemma.
I mean, it speaks to the sort of lack of funding for our immigration system writ large, right? The need for more judges, the need for more, sort of infrastructure all the way down the line, and those are exactly the things that are being sort of taken away.
The priorities.
At this particular moment. I think both of you have alluded to some of the implications of this increased enforcement. How else are you seeing that with the people who come to, get your help in terms of this sort of daily, almost like relentless, I don't know.
Onslaught.
Almost, yeah, like almost assault, that's happening right now. Denise, if you would love to start.
Yeah, so at least for me, because my role is very grounding techniques, right, like how to really support people, I think the most that I've been doing since Trump's administration is having a lot of conversations with people who are in detention right now, because that's, right now, I'm not seeing a lot of people who are out of the community, because there is more know your rights workshops, right? There's more, the attorneys are like guiding them like what to do, what to say. But in detention, it's a lot of fear right now. They're scared of like what's gonna come next, right? People are being there for more than a year already. And so it's like, I have to show up for them. And then that's also like, what more can I say to these people that are suffering under harsh conditions, right? Like they're being denied alternatives for incarceration, right? Like no matter how much we're trying to get them out on release, they'll just like keep denying bond, like, so it's like, I feel like impotent sometimes. Like it just feels like nothing I say will be enough. So yeah, I think it's just a hard moment for me personally as someone who is a child of a deportee, and then also like talking to someone who's a caregiver or has family here.
Yeah, and that speaks to the implications, as you both have referred to, not just on the person themselves going through the process, but everybody that their life touches. Do you have anything to add, Cynthia?
I wanted to add the issue of secondary trauma. And I think that we are normally, because we hear people, we see them at their worst in their lives under the worst circumstances. So I feel that at this point in time, we have to be more so on guard that we don't take in so much of the trauma that we cannot refresh and recharge so that we can go back to the fight and to continue to fight that is extremely challenging and tiring. So I would say a lot of what I have spent time on for myself as well as for my colleagues and my team, how do we equip ourselves so that we can put on our own oxygen mask so that we can be there tomorrow for clients. And it's a constant exercise that we have to just practice daily.
Yeah, what would be some strategies that you would suggest for people who are within immigrant communities or who are dealing with people who are in immigrant communities in order to be able to, recharge themselves as necessary to be as helpful as possible?
Well, I know I meditate more, I do breath work, mindfulness, I think spirituality. I see people who, no matter what their faith is, if they are able to tap into that, they have more successful outcomes. It doesn't change the case, but their coping mechanism. So that's what I say. And I know that we try to tap into our social work team and make sure that we are all in communication with each other so that we don't burn out.
What would you suggest, Denise?
I would say the same, right? Like taking care of myself, but also I'm always like looking for, okay, I don't have the capacity or the knowledge or expertise to like answer that question, but I will always make connections with other people in different areas. So like having a pool of resources is so important because, sometimes like even my own mom, she thinks I know everything, and so I can't answer everything. Like, so I have to, and our family members or community members, so always like making sure you like have connections with your community and being in touch with them is so important. because community is everything to me, you know, it's like collective care.
Thank you for that. I have more questions that I know are brilliant, but I want to open this up to our audience to be able to ask questions. So at this point, if anybody has a question that they would like to pose to our panelists, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you both for coming to join us and for supporting our series. My name is Diana, and Cynthia specifically, I'd like to ask you, if I may, you touched briefly on travel for individuals and their safety when it comes to their digital hygiene and such. I'm curious what recommendations you would have for individuals who are traveling outside of the country to visit loved ones, perhaps for funerals or other significant milestones in their life, and they'd like to come back safely. Specifically, if you can touch on individuals who may have TPS or other designated protective services status.
I find myself more and more sounding like the bearer of bad news, but I prefer that clients are fully informed and empowered to make the decision that works best for them. With that said, someone who has TPS is in a very, very vulnerable position. And my closest response would be really, and I tell everyone this, do not leave the United States thinking I'm going to be able to come back. And I said that before, but I say it with more conviction now in 2025, because to answer that question really runs the gamut of a person's immigration status. And I think that people who are particularly vulnerable, like TPS holders, like parolees, for example, I would really kind of advise them to not travel, not leave the United States, even for a funeral, unfortunately. And what I try to do is tell that person, I can't make the decision for you, but let me tell you what could happen if you do try. You can always leave the United States. The problem is coming back. And how would that loved one feel if you were not able, if your dream is to do X, Y, and Z in the United States, how would your loved one feel that you were not able to fulfill that because you attended that funeral? As hard as that sounds to say, I feel that at least if the person has that information, the person can make an informed decision.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and, relating your experience to us. Being in higher ed, we are, deeply impacted by some of these really rapid and inhumane type of policy, right? Particularly our international students. Everyone is aware, for example, that over 1,000 international students, their record has been terminated from SEVIS. Therefore, while they have been here under legal status, because of that sweeping change, they have now become illegal, quote unquote, or undocumented. What kind of advice would you share with, let's say, a student who finds themselves in that predicament?
I would advise the student to get a comprehensive immigration law consultation. And it needs to be with an attorney who can spot issues. And for example, look at someone's eligibility for asylum. Now, in our work in the United States here is to represent people who are asylum seekers or who came here as refugees. Not everyone is eligible for asylum, and some people don't want asylum because it generally means the person cannot go back to the country that issued the visa. So I would definitely see if there's a combination. So that's humanitarian immigration law. I would look at family-based immigration law, but again, it's a long wait, as well as any business-related option. So that's why I say it's a comprehensive consultation where the person brings a resume or is prepared to talk about, this is what I've been doing in school, am I eligible for changing my visa status to something else?
Other questions? I can piggyback on the higher education question, and just that not only in terms of advice to students, but perhaps advice to college administrations about how they could help their students be as informed and empowered as possible in this current moment. What suggestions you might have?
Well, first, as a CUNY student myself, I recently remember the incident that happened at John Jay where they had a job fair, DHS was there, and so that created an unsafe space for students, right? And so I'm not sure how it works, like in terms of legal stuff, but just ensuring to the students, like, how Hostos will protect them, right? Like, how, when will they allow them in? Like, breaking it down for them is so important because this is a safe space for them too. And then the other thing that I was thinking when Cynthia mentioned digital stuff, right now, public advocates, attorneys, like, we're being, like, basically attacked for repping, right, people. And so one thing that we're being told right now is, like, making sure that we delete all apps, right, where we have information, like, of our clients. So, you know, sometimes we use WhatsApp, like, with my clients, or like Google Voice, or, you know, our emails, and there's sensitive information that talks about their statuses too. So making sure we delete it in a very secure way when we go to the airport or if we're crossing the border, because they are allowed to look at our phones, like Cynthia said. So that is something that I would also suggest, like, faculty, like, thinking about that, like, when you travel, just remember, like, we have our emails in there, right? And it's like, and then another thing is, resource collecting, right, is so important. Who is the designated person here where there's gonna be specific resources? Like, there's Black trans immigrants, right? They're like, who are, like, or like, are they afraid of healthcare now, like accessing healthcare, mental health services that, and many of them don't even have insurance, right? If you're undocumented, you are not eligible for insurance unless it's NYC Care or other things, but even that won't even be enough to cover, like, therapy sessions, or like, who, like, just collecting resources. And I say this because till this day, like, almost 10 years later, like, we still don't know how to deal with family separation, or, you know, like, you know, it's still something that's a very specific need, right? Like, there's people who are probably suffering in silence, people who are afraid. So I think just continuing to talk about this shows that, like, you all do care about this issue very much.
Yeah, I would agree, and it shows receptivity to the issues that individual students may face. I think sometimes students don't know until they're, like, in high school or college, that they are not documented because the parents did not want to scare them. So I remember I was talking at a high school in Brooklyn, I think it was, and this young student was talking to me, and I knew I said, oh my goodness, this child does not have documentation, but she doesn't realize it. And she was going, this is where it manifests itself, when there's an internship program. And a counselor may suggest that the student apply for the program. And then the counselor is saying, this is what we need for the application, and the student is really happy. The student asks for Social Security. Oh, okay, I don't remember. Let me ask my mother and father. And I remember this girl saying, my parents won't let me have my passport, and I want to apply for this internship. So, all right, the immigration attorney said to me, it's not a big deal to produce the passport, because let's say the parent thought that the child might lose the passport, well, then just provide it to the guidance counselor. So I think there's little cues that you might have someone who's really bright and otherwise eligible for a program, and then there's some hesitation with producing the necessary documents in support of the application, and then that's like a red flag.
We have time for one more question. Do you have any other questions from the audience?
My question is sort of thinking back to some of the historical stuff, and you know, right now, it seems like everybody's on the defensive. At least everyone who is pro-immigrant is on the defensive right now. I'm wondering, what can we do to change the narrative about immigration, to stress the positives? You know, I live in an immigrant community. I have family, friends who are immigrants. You know, what can we do, and maybe looking historically as well, like, how do you change the narrative? How do you change it so that you're not always on the defensive? What can we do to get on the offensive and to actually try to make it so that we're making a strong case for why immigrants are important for our communities, for New York City as a whole? I'm thinking of the 1960s and 70s when there was a drop in immigration, and a lot of, you know, that affected the economy of New York as well. And then you think in the current last 20 years, immigrants have really bolstered the economy of New York City. So I'm just trying to, you know, think of what are some of the narratives that we can change. How do we do that?
Oh, take it?
That's a really tough question, actually. But I'm just thinking, like, when I was younger, like, and I would take history, for example, that was just so boring to me. I didn't really understand, like, any of it. But I'm just thinking, like, how can specific immigration, like, for example, there's a narrative that immigrants don't pay taxes, right? Like that. And right now, recently, IRS made a deal with the government. So, like, it kind of contradicts, right? Like, wait, so you're saying they weren't paying taxes, yet now you want information? So it's like, how could, like, maybe, you know, implementing specific graphs within courses, right? Like, about how much money, like, immigrants have paid in taxes, right? Like, how, like, to, like, little by little implementing very specific things about, you know, the narrative of immigration too, because right now a lot of people don't think that immigrants pay taxes, right? And then also, I would also say, no, it went away. Let me think about it.
Okay.
That's just one way, though, that I was saying, like, in academia, at least, like, because you do direct, like, teaching, like implementing some creative ways of how you would want to teach specific courses with specific graphs or, like, information on immigration.
No, I think it is telling the stories. And just like the president said, you know, I am an immigrant. I was not born in this country. To just give a face, I am too the face of immigration. I am an immigrant or I am an ally. And I think stories like in our organization, we highlight this person, and our goal is to escort the person and be part of that journey from arrival to U.S. citizenship. And when we have a family that becomes U.S. citizens, it is something that we celebrate and we put on the website. And, you know, yes, there are sometimes people who are fleeing horrible situations and they've got relatives back home. So we're not going to feature that person's photo. But there's enough of narrative to be put out there and see this is where we are in the community. We are a part of every aspect of community. We're at the MTA. We are at the FDNY. I think in New York we live in this great bubble where we do see that diversity of voices, but it's the national level. And so how do we publicize that to the rest of the nation? That's a big problem.
I don't have thank you so much, great presentation. I have more like a comment for Sam. This is how I would put it. We're almost 250 years old, okay, as a country. We're the richest country on earth with the most powerful military. Everyone in the country is an immigrant. If that's not an endorsement for immigration, I don't know what could be, because there's only a small group of people in this country that are First Nation people. Yeah. The whole country is a country of immigrants, and that's what has made us so special and has allowed our country to grow with the ingenuity of everyone that has come to this country. And that's what we need to value and hold on to. And don't let anybody else convince you any otherwise.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. The only thing I will say historically is that it's important to remember that all politics is local, right? So that it always needs to occur on multiple fronts at once and sort of one person at a time. the sort of grassroots organizing sort of model that's, taking place in a number of local organizations, tapping into those and then broadening the movement out, from there, and really forcing our political leaders to be accountable for the narratives that they peddle, especially when they're incorrect, by really threatening them with their office, right? Getting them out of the powerful positions that they hold, and endorsing people who hold positions that are more in line with what your values are. Thank you very much for attending our event, and we want to thank our two panelists one final time. Please join us at our future events, which we will be advertising in the coming months, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.